Welcome, everybody, to the Commudemy podcast. Today is our inaugural episode. We're excited to hear from Rehana Al-Soltane, who is an AI learning manager at the Raspberry Pi Foundation. She was previously at the Khan Lab School in Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, as a coding instructor at Code First Girls, with a fascinating career spanning education, innovation, and community building. Rehana, it's so awesome to have you on. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Very excited to be on the inaugural podcast.
It's awesome to have you. And I'd love to hear a little bit, Rihanna, about your story and kind of your journey to become the AI literacy professional that you are today. What influenced you, some of the experiences that were really important in your career that shaped who you are today?
We would have to go back to when I was a little kid. So I grew up with a very big interest in everything and anything you can imagine. I grew up in a family that was very makery. My dad was a car mechanic, so I spent some of my summers in the garage with him. My mom sews a lot and she creates a lot. And so from a very young age, I've always been exposed to people creating physical artifacts, but also in some way creating their own lives, right? I decided to study psychology mostly because I figured that my biggest interest at that time was my interest in people and how their backgrounds influence their behaviors. What aspects influence our behaviors the most on a day-to-day basis? Why do we make the decisions that we do? And why does everyone end up having such a different life trajectory? And then a lot of it you can trace back to their childhood and how they grew up and with the tools that they grew up with, right? Or the tools and the behavioral tools that they were raised with. And so that background in psychology then led me to become very interested in technology. Because when I was growing up, there wasn't really a name for the tools that I was using. I was just creating, I was just making. And technology was another medium for creation for me. When I was studying psychology, I also realized that I could combine my passion for creativity, the whole creation, the making side that I had with technology and education as well. And that's kind of how I started. And I started with an internship at a makerspace, actually, here in London, that I ended up doing with a woman who's still my mentor, who taught me a lot and who also taught me that I could combine everything that I'm passionate about into one career.
That's awesome, Rihanna. I think there's a common thread of making and building over the course of your career, which I'm very excited to learn more about and to actually have you share. So, you mentioned this mentor that was so influential in your career. Is there a pivotal experience, an inflection point in all of your learning and making that you think really influenced who you are today and formed some of these frameworks that you are now teaching actively?
Yeah, so very surprisingly, it actually started with Helen. So Helen is the woman who I did my first internship with. So Helen Lee is her name. I think before I did that internship, and this was years ago, I always thought of education as happening in silos. So when you learn maths, that happens in the math world. When you learn physics, that happens in the physics world. And the same thing for computer science and for like arts as well. Like everything happens in a silo. And I think when I did that internship at her startup, and it was an educational tech startup, designing kits to teach children interdisciplinary skills. So, you would learn about coding by building a robot unicorn, for example. And I think through that experience, I learned that education shouldn't be happening in silos. Learning shouldn't be happening in silos. And that the most powerful learning experiences are the ones where you can combine your passions or combine at least multiple disciplines in one, because the real world doesn't happen in silos. The fact that cars drive isn't possible because of just the physics world, right? There's a whole bunch of disciplines and a whole bunch of science that comes together to produce this one artifact or this one vehicle. And the same thing with learning and education as well is that the more disciplines you can combine, and there's a sweet spot, right? But when you get to learn in an interdisciplinary way, I think that's when real deep learning happens.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the key inspirations behind this podcast And the reason that it's called Commudemy is I see learning happening in communities, right? So it's a community academy. And one of the great joys I have as somebody operating in this space is breaking those silos, having individuals take on a more cross functional, interdisciplinary, and communal take on learning, because at the end of the day, that's what builds a society, is various parties with their own areas of expertise, with their own strengths, coming together and really nurturing a shared understanding of how to better some aspect of society, how to build something, how to grow something, how to nurture each other as we continue to grow and adapt to the changing times. So that's definitely a theme that I'm going to be continuing to discuss, not only in this episode, but in future episodes. And so, Rehana, take me back a little bit to what influenced you to become interested in the emerging technologies that are ubiquitous in today's day and age, right? So, not a day goes by where we don't hear about something new happening in artificial intelligence, breakneck speed. I mean, we just celebrated the 2-year anniversary of ChatGPT being released to the masses. When was it that you really built an interest in AI literacy and in all things AI, maybe?
So AI is a very recent phenomena, right? And it came out 2 years ago, like you said. And I remember when it came out and I was doing my graduate studies at the School of Education at Harvard in Boston, where we have a shared background in. And at the time, it wasn't really a big thing. Many people were very surprised about it, but we didn't really grasp the true impact of these technologies. It wasn't after I graduated from my graduate school that I got a job teaching at Khan Lab School, which was in the Bay Area. And Khan Lab School is an experimental lab school, part of Khan Academy. So we implement Sol Khan's visions on how education should be or can be. But it's also a space for educators to come and implement their visions as well. So it was a very welcoming space for trying out new technologies, teaching with new technologies, or, trying out new ideas. And that's also when I got a little bit exposed to, a little bit of those AI technologies that we hear about now, but also a different kind, which was specifically designed for children. Because at the time that I was working there, Khan Academy was working on a tool called Khanmigo, which got released about a few months ago. And we were beta testing it at Khan Lab School. And that's also when I realized what the potential impact this kind of technology can have on children's lives, but also on everyone everyone who has access to the internet or who has access to those tools. Because in the realms of education, for example, what I saw that a tool like Comigo could do is really help students talk through their mathematical problems that they're having in front of them, talk through obstacles that they're facing in solving those mathematical problems. And I just remembered how I was as a kid and how the math world seemed so scary to me. And if I had a tool like this, how much more welcoming it felt. Because it wasn't just me trying to solve these by myself or waiting for my teacher to come and help me or asking my peers. Now, in addition to those people around me, I also had a tool that could assist me in solving those problems. So that's when I really started becoming very interested in AI tools and how to implement AI in education. And that's also how I got into AI literacy education and thinking about what the skills are that children and young people need to know and really master to be able to use these tools very effectively and in a way that when we are not around anymore on this planet, we leave this planet behind in the hands of really capable and critical individuals who have those skills to navigate those tools critically and effectively. And I think that's what AI literacy is mostly about, is how do we navigate those tools around us and how do we use them effectively and critically?
That's such a, it's a very, I think, interesting and incredibly important component of overall digital literacy, if I can call it that. I've been involved in digital literacy initiatives in the past. It was within this context of building literacy in the digital realm that so many of us have really benefited, not only in our careers, but also in terms of on society, right? And When we think about AI literacy, Rehana, I would love to understand, like, what are some of the topics? I gather from what you're sharing that responsible, maybe ethical use of AI, these are things that I've seen personally are really important in the realm of literacy. But maybe in the context of children, since you touched on that particular demographic, but also for the general population as a whole, what are some of the topics that you're teaching about or that you're excited about?
I think AI literacy spans across multiple skills, and one of them is what I work on right now with my work at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, who have done some incredible work on producing AI resources and AI education resources. When I say AI literacy, I think what I mean is the technical skills and the non technical skills that involve using AI technologies. When I say technical skills, I think that what we need young people to really know about or understand is how to apply computational thinking to solving problems around them, right? And one of the aspects that AI brings about is that problems can be solved in different ways now. We have tools that help us accelerate drug discovery and help us with weather forecasting and air pollution forecasting. And there's so many things that are accelerating our growth and our understanding of different problems around us. And when I think of AI literacy in terms of technical skills, I think it's very important that we teach young people those skills that they need to really go on and tackle those problems. And that's why I think that computer science in schools is going to look very different in a few years. And that young people still, and children and students still need to learn coding and programming, but that it will look different because now we have much more assistance. And then the other non-technical skill that children need to know about is those, I think, are the skills that we usually refer to as AI safety, which is you have all these tools now around us, like deepfakes, like deepfake tools, and they're very easily accessible and they're free. And you can create some pretty malicious things on there, but should children do that? Should people do that? And the answer is always no, right? But how it's almost like illiteracy, right? Like internet safety or e-safety that we had back in our day. This is like a tremendous amount of information and knowledge that we're exposed to, but we should use it for good. And I think that a lot of AI literacy skills is how do we teach young people to use those technologies for good? But also, how do we make those tools unmysterious for many people? When you talk about AI tools, for example, and we think about ChatGPT, and I go into schools sometimes, and the general sense that I get is that most people think that this is like a gigantic encyclopedia that knows everything and that has all the answers. But it's not really true, right? Because we know that these tools hallucinate. We also know that those tools don't produce factual information all the time. They come up with like sources that don't exist. And yes, these problems are becoming less relevant because these tools are also becoming better at producing better information and more factual information. But still, like children need to be critical of this, of the information that they are consuming, just like they were in the day of internet safety or e-safety.
Yeah, it's incredibly important, I think, for society as a whole to understand the power of AI, both for good and for potentially not good purposes, right? And we're seeing examples of that day to day. And kind of demystifying AI, I think, is a big step in that direction, where if something is not accessible to folks at the outset, right, giving them the agency and empowering them to treat AI as a tool that can be used to bring about a lot of value, helping them obtain value in some other way, right? I think positioning AI as what it is. I mean, being realistic with learners about what it is that the power of this technology can really provide is a great first step, because that's almost the expectation setting that you want to do to enable people to then embark on those learning journeys for whatever type of purpose that it is, that willing to take advantage of whatever it is that they're trying to achieve using this technology. One of the things that really spoke to me when I first met you, Rehana, and just as a little bit of a history lesson maybe for the audience, We met at a startup conference in London this past June of 2024. What really inspires me about not only the work that I'm doing now in this podcast and this exercise in community building that I'm embarking on is the global impact of learning and how learning, again, as we mentioned at the beginning, it's about breaking silos. It's about bringing people together so we can share common understandings, pressure test common pain points, learn and grow together. In the work that you've done, Rihanna, and you do a lot of traveling all over Europe and all over many different countries, what are some of the strategies that you've employed or that you found to be very helpful in building and nurturing communities of learners at scale, right? So, in the training that you do and the work that you do, what are some of those key strategies that you think are so helpful?
It's again a very good question. I don't get that often. Such a thoughtful question. So what comes to mind is there was an organization that I worked with a few years ago, and they're called the Microbit Foundation. And they produce a microcontroller that enables many children a very beginner-friendly space to experiment with coding by bringing it into the real world. And I was a microbit champion for about a year. And what that meant was we would get together with educators all over the world to discuss projects that they had come up with. We would share resources. Different teachers tried different things in different countries. And it was just a really fun and safe place for people to feel heard, to feel part of this very big initiative. And I think that has always been very beautiful. What is so important in creating spaces like these is that people feel valued and supported. Many companies or organizations have forums or workshops that they do all over the world. And what I think that the Microbit Foundation did really well at the time when I was working with them is that they had these multiple avenues for community creation and for community building. And if you were a teacher in the Middle East or in Africa, there was a avenue for you to be part of that community, be it through these champion programs, through the online forums, through Facebook groups, or through other physical conferences or meetups. And I think that as a organization, I think the more you give your users the autonomy to create those communities themselves as well, the better, because people will feel empowered to talk to each other about what they're doing and to help each other and to collaborate and to share resources. And I think that's what a true community to me means, is one where people feel valued and supported to share those resources, to collaborate, and to help each other.
Wonderful. I'm so happy to have you on this podcast, Rihanna, because we're literally on the same wavelength when it comes to so many of these thoughts around community building and integrating technology and learning into that experience. I would love to ask you, with AI being such a rapidly emerging, breakneck speed, every day there's something new, what trends specifically in AI and maybe AI in education, because you're involved in that field so actively, what trends in AI in education excite you the most right now?
It was actually a platform that I came across yesterday, so this is perfect timing. But it's kind of a sibling to Notebook LM, which
Oh,
I know
wow.
you must have heard of. It's a platform where you can feed in your documents and it will create a mini podcast for you, or like a mini overview. It's an avenue for people who like to listen to things more than they read. So I've heard examples of people putting in their yearly reports in Notebook LM, and on their way home, they would listen to it. And that's much more enjoyable than reading the report, right? But there is another platform, the new kid on the block, so to say. It's called Illuminate. And it's a platform that will help you understand really complicated research papers. So it's a platform that helps you understand research papers, and it can be from any field you can imagine. And this is very powerful to me because I feel that education, a lot of times, there are barriers to accessing education or high quality education. And especially when you go into higher education, a lot of that is reading research articles and reading a lot of research articles. And you know that as well, because I'm sure you had the same experience in your grad school as well. And I think that platforms like these make it much more accessible for people whose first language isn't English, or who have different learning or reading needs, or people who like to listen more than they like to read, or research articles that are so complicated that there's just a barrier into understanding those research papers because you don't have the background knowledge to fully digest or understand what this article is about. And the reason why I'm so excited about this tool is because there's been this one paper that I have tried reading like maybe 5 times and I don't get past the first page. And mostly because I get maybe distracted or I just don't get it sometimes. And I would love to read it and really be able to understand it, but also to talk about it because a lot of my friends who work in machine learning or who are machine learning engineers or software engineers, they know about it and they talk about it in such a amazing way. And I want to be able to contribute to these conversations too. This paper is Attention is All You Need. It's the first paper about transformers, and it was written by engineers at Google. That paper transformed how we approach AI and how we create AI tools as well, because transformers are the T in GPT. If I can use that tool to finally understand a paper like that, maybe I can finally give it a shot. And I fed it in yesterday and it was pretty good. It was really good and it was very informative.
That's fantastic. Illuminate is able to shine the light on very complex research papers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah, I think it's one of the really exciting things about this technology, beyond the fact that it's accessible and beyond the fact that we are spearheading so many initiatives. Rehana, you mentioned so many examples of ways that you're democratizing access to knowledge when it comes to AI and really being a pivotal player in that process. I think what's so exciting is if we have this conversation literally 2 months from now, it'll be two other platforms that come to mind, most likely. And who knows how far the world will advance with regards to AI and all these emerging technologies. It's an exciting time to be in the education technology field specifically, and to be in a position of privilege, I would say, to have so much access to these tools that we couldn't really even dream of just a few years ago. And with that, Rihanna, I would love to thank you for being a part of this podcast. Any other thoughts that come to mind just reflecting on all the different topics we talked about today?
I'm going to echo a little bit of what you just concluded, which is if we had this conversation 2 months from now, it would be totally different. And that is very true. And that is what's so exciting about this field and about being in this field as well, right? Is that it's a ever changing field that gets more and more exciting. It can be quite daunting to try these tools out or to integrate those in your daily workflow, for example, or to increase your efficiency or to help you study better or learn new topics like I am right now. But I think that with any tool or any platform that we approach, we don't have to be an expert at it. And it's okay to be a beginner at things. It's okay to tinker. Tinkering is my favorite word as well that I learned a while back, also from my mentor Helen. And it's a word that gets used in the maker community a lot. Tinkering means you just make things or you hack things or you take things apart. This is all called tinkering. And it's all experimenting, right? And I really encourage anyone to experiment with these technologies and with these tools to help them get to their goals and help them learn better and study better and accelerate their growth.
That's awesome. Wise words from Rihanna, and couldn't agree more. Here's to tinkering. If you've made it all the way to the end, please do take some time to tinker in your free time. I'm sure it'll be a really immersive and valuable experience. With that being said, Rihanna, thank you so much for joining and having this awesome conversation with me. I hope we can reconnect again very soon.
Thank you for having me, Rohan, and amazing initiative.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.